Here's something worth sitting with for a second. Almost nobody at the very top of the wealth ladder got there from a salary alone. Look at any list of the wealthiest people on the planet, and the overwhelming majority own something. A business, a portfolio of assets, a rare skill, or occasionally an inheritance. Pure employees, people who simply trade hours for a paycheck and nothing else, barely register on that list at all. That's not a coincidence. It's the actual mechanism. Entrepreneurs own businesses. Investors own assets. People with rare, valuable skills effectively own something no one can repossess. And if you don't own something, the uncomfortable truth is that you're the thing being owned. Your time traded for money with no compounding attached to it. So how do you start owning things without needing to already be rich? You need a system, not motivation. And the simplest one I found breaks down like this: 25% toward growth, 15% toward stability, 50% toward essentials, and 10% toward rewards. 4 numbers, 1 paycheck, and you never have to think hard about where the money goes again. Let's go through each one.
The first 25%, growth. This is the portion that works without you. Growth doesn't mean vague self-improvement. It means money that buys things that increase in value over time, so that while you're at work, this money is quietly working too. Here's why most people never get here. The paycheck lands, the bills get paid, and whatever's left gets spent on things that are forgotten within a month. That's not a personal failing so much as a structural trap. You're paid, you spend it down to nearly nothing, and then you're right back to needing next month's paycheck just to stay even. The way out starts with treating that first 25% as non-negotiable, moved out of reach before you can spend it.
Let's make this concrete. Say 2 people both start investing $200 a month, one starting at age 20, the other waiting until 30, and then investing $300 a month to try to catch up. By 60, the person who started at 20 has put in $96,000 of their own money over 40 years. The person who waited has put in $108,000 over 30 years, more money out of pocket. But assume a 10% average annual return, roughly the long-run average for a broad stock index. The person who started later ends up with around $678,000. The person who started 10 years earlier ends up with well over $1.2 million, despite contributing $12,000 less overall. The only difference between them was 10 years of time. That's what compounding actually rewards, and it's the entire reason I'll start once I have more money quietly costs people more than almost any other financial decision they make.
So where does this 25% actually go? Think of your options on a rough scale from steady to speculative. At the calmer end, index funds are a simple way to own a slice of the entire market without picking individual winners. A step up, real estate, either directly or through a REIT if buying property outright isn't realistic yet. In the middle, a valuable skill, something like a trade, a technical skill, or a service people pay for directly, which nobody can repossess, and which often pays back faster than any investment. Further up the risk scale are things like an online business or individual stocks, which can pay off big but demand real time and a tolerance for failed attempts. And at the top, speculative assets, crypto, collectibles, anything that can double or evaporate without warning. Fun to dabble in with money you can afford to lose, not the foundation.
If you're starting from zero, the foundation is almost always index funds plus a skill worth developing. Everything else can wait until those two are solid. One detail matters more than people expect: where you hold this money. A basic tax-advantaged retirement account, whatever version exists where you live, usually lets this growth happen without handing a chunk of it straight to taxes. It's worth 10 minutes of research before you invest a single dollar, because the account you use often matters almost as much as what's inside it.
The next 15%, stability.
This is the part that keeps you in the game long enough for the first 25% to matter. A lot of people skip this because it feels like dead money sitting around instead of growing. That's exactly backwards. Without it, the first unexpected expense forces you to pull money out of your investments at the worst possible moment just to cover a bill, undoing months or years of progress in a single afternoon. Here's how to size it. Add up your true monthly baseline: rent, groceries, utilities, transport, nothing extra. Multiply that by 5. That's your target stability fund. If your baseline is $1,500 a month, you're aiming for around $7,500, sitting somewhere safe and untouched. 3 rules for where that money lives. It needs to be accessible within a day, not locked away earning slightly more interest in exchange for a withdrawal penalty. It needs to carry 0 risk, never in the market, never in anything that can drop the day you actually need it. And it should still earn something modest while it waits, in a plain high-yield savings account, so inflation isn't quietly eating it in the meantime. To build it faster, automate the transfer the day you get paid, so you never see the money long enough to spend it. If you ever dip into it for something real, treat topping it back up next payday as non-negotiable. And small tools, roundup savings features, cashback redirected straight into this fund, add up faster than they seem like they should.
The next 50%? Essentials. This is the part that keeps you alive, not impressed. Here's a statistic worth sitting with. A majority of high earners still live paycheck to paycheck, not because they don't make enough, but because their spending expands right alongside their income. The car gets nicer, the apartment gets bigger, the wardrobe gets more expensive. None of it shows up as waste in the moment. It just quietly consumes the raise that should have gone toward growth instead. True essentials are narrower than most people assume. Housing, groceries, utilities, transport, insurance, and basic clothing. Not the subscription you forgot you had. Not the gym membership you haven't used since January. Capping this category at 50% forces a choice. Either trim what doesn't need to be there, or find a way to earn more instead of just spending more. 2 categories matter more than all the rest combined. Housing, because it's usually the single biggest line item, is worth renegotiating at every lease renewal, since most landlords would rather keep a decent tenant than relist a unit. And transport, where financing a car that's nicer than your current budget can support is one of the most common ways people quietly cap their own future wealth for years at a time. A reliable used option, held on to a little longer than feels exciting, frees up real money every single month. For anything in between, the impulse buys, the maybe I need this purchases, a short filter helps more than willpower ever will. Ask if it's a genuine impulse or something you've actually wanted for a while. If it's an impulse, wait 7 days and ask again. Most of the pull fades on its own. If it survives that wait, ask whether you're paying for the brand or the actual value. A $60 item worn 100 times beats a $200 item worn twice, every time. And finally, ask whether it will genuinely improve your life, or whether it's really about boredom or trying to impress someone. That one question, asked consistently, quietly filters out most bad purchases before they happen.
The last 10%? Rewards. This is the part that keeps the whole system sustainable. Skip this category entirely, and saving eventually starts to feel like punishment, which is exactly when most people abandon the plan altogether and overspend to compensate. This 10% isn't a leak in the system. It's what keeps the other 90% from collapsing under its own restriction. The categories that tend to earn back the most aren't things, they're experiences and connection. A trip that becomes a genuine memory. A hobby that keeps you recognizably yourself outside of work. Time with people who matter instead of another evening postponed for later. A thoughtful gift for someone you care about. None of this needs to be large. It needs to be intentional, and it needs its own account so it never quietly gets absorbed into the other 3 categories. Set it up the same way as the rest.
An automatic transfer of that same 10% into its own account the day you're paid. And treat the limit as real. If it runs out before the month does, the answer isn't refilling it from somewhere else. It's waiting until next month, the same way the system asks you to wait for everything else worth having.
So here's the whole thing in one line. 25% builds your future without your attention. 15% protects it from a single bad month undoing it. 50% keeps you alive without quietly funding a lifestyle you never actually chose. And 10% keeps the whole system livable long enough that you actually stick with it. None of these four numbers are complicated. The only hard part is setting up the transfers once and then leaving them alone. The same discipline that made the 10 years earlier investor end up with hundreds of thousands more than the person who waited. It was never about a better strategy. It was about a system simple enough to actually survive contact with real life. If this reframed how you think about your next paycheck, subscribe. That's exactly the kind of thing this channel exists to break down. And tell me in the comments, which of these four numbers is the one you're most guilty of ignoring?